what assurances are there for homeschoolers if they're working with the Frontier Institute, they're working with you and EdNavigate, that you guys are working for a school choice system that isn't going to burden them with excessive government interference?
Well, absolutely. So let me just say,
kind of a loaded question.
It is a totally loaded question, but I really appreciate it because it's really important that we get this message out.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Family Matters Podcast, brought to you by the Montana Family Foundation. I'm Derek Astriker, and I'm here with a special guest, actually someone who's been on our podcast before we had video, a dear friend, Cheryl Tuskin, and you are the Education Outreach Coordinator for the Frontier Institute, and in that role, you lead and manage the EdNavigate program. Cheryl, first of all, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, it's such a blessing to be here again.
Yeah.
It was such a great podcast last time, and
Yes.
it's good to. We were just launching EdNavigate, and now here we are a full year into the program, and so we have a lot to discuss.
Yes. So I was going to ask you too. I mean, it has been a year. So, I mean, obviously we've got highlights from a year of running this program. So, but let's remind our listeners, what is EdNavigate? What's the goal? What's the mission?
Right. So ednavigatemt.com, that's where you can go to learn about all the education options in Montana. So we exist to help parents navigate the education landscape with confidence and freedom.
Yes.
But not just parents, but also educators and providers, people who might want to start a school. We give them starting guides. How do you get rolling on opening a micro school? But also on the parents' side, how do you start homeschooling? What are some tips and tricks to make sure that experience goes well? Like, what kind of curriculum do I need to offer? But then also scholarships. We have 2 different charter school laws that were passed in 2023.
That's right.
I explained the difference between those 2. One of them stuck in the courts, and so you can also find different schools who are in your area.
Right.
So we have a school finder map, and you put in your little zip code, and then all these schools pop up, and you can filter it out. If you're just looking for a private school, you can filter just for private schools. If you want to look for just the high schools in your area, you can look for that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and you were telling me before we started recording, I mean, you have some awesome stories from families that you've helped over the past year. What are some of the highlights?
Yeah, so I have some highlights and some lowlights, actually,
Sure.
because Montana doesn't have a whole lot of education options. So I'll maybe talk about this one gal, Delayla, who contacted me. She moved here from a school choice state, and she said, goodness, I love this Montessori school for my daughter. The cost is getting really high. I have another daughter who's coming in. Is there a tax credit for me to at least get a little bit back on my taxes to compensate for the cost of the tuition?
Right.
And at the time, we didn't have any tax credits. We still don't have any straight up tax credits to offer her directly. But I said, well, maybe you can apply for an ACE scholarship through our tax credit scholarship program that's for private school tuition.
Right.
And she makes just a little bit too much money for that. So then, she's one of those families that is stuck in the middle. And I do see this a lot. And I've spoken to at least 150 parents trying to figure out what options are available for their student, how they can exit the public school system and find something that works better for them. And she is definitely one story that I come across, unfortunately, a little too often than I'd like to admit, that she's stuck in the middle. She makes too much money to afford an income-based scholarship, but she doesn't make enough money to cash flow private school for 2 students.
Right.
And she really didn't want to have her kids in public school. So that's one story. But then there's another mom, Sarah, who had a child with disabilities, and she was in the public school system and just really struggling to get the IEP, that individualized education plan, with the public school, tailored to her daughter just right. And her daughter was a teenager and still not reading. And she just was, frustrated and wanted to know what her options were. And so I helped guide her through the application process for our special needs education savings account,
Right.
which
Kind of a new
is a brand new program. Last year was its first year in operation. And there are 2 application periods. So there's one from May 1st to June 1st, and then a second one from November 1st to December 1st. And so you can enter mid-year into the program, and you get, depending on your grade and your school district, you'd get about $6,500 if you were in K-8, and then if you were in high school, you'd get roughly $8,000 to $8,500 to educate your child. And so those dollars can be used toward private school tuition, tutoring costs, homeschool curriculum if you decide to do full homeschooling, as well as specialized therapies, reading helps,
right.
as well as transportation reimbursement. So
Wow.
she was able to take the big leap and make that change in their lives. And so they're doing really well. They were accepted into the program, and
Wow.
they're doing it themselves now.
And have you kind of followed their progress? I mean, you said the daughter wasn't able to read. Is she getting help with
well,
that?
she just applied back in November, so
Yes.
they've only been on the program for about 6 months, and then entering into this next school year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Very
yeah.
cool.
So
okay.
It's I've seen a lot of parents excited about taking things into their own hands and moving forward.
That's kind of the neat thing about the school choice movement, is that it's all about kind of having that nimbleness in the area of education, because not every child is the same. One size fits all just doesn't work for families and for individual children. So having these programs that you can kind of tailor fit to your child, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it?
It is. And, in a world where we have so much customization happening, like we have our little smartphones, and all of our smartphones look different because we've customized it based on our needs and our values and
Right.
what I need on my phone and different apps. And so I think of the school choice movement in a similar way, where we can have individualized, tailored, customized experiences for each of our kids. So you might have a kid who's just absolutely brilliant and getting like C minuses and bored out of their mind in regular school. And it's because, they're, for many reasons, but they're
Sure.
bored out of their minds and they're not applying themselves or able to go at their own speed. So here's another story. I met a gentleman by the name of Nick. He also was able to get his son onto the special needs ESA, and the son is doing an online program through Acellus Academy, and the student is going so fast. He's so excited. He's like, wow, like this is a great program, and he's going at his speed, which is faster than what he was doing in public schools, and he's super excited to like finish, this grade year by Christmas time, and
Right.
he is inspired by, the concept of taking it at his own pace and going as fast as he wants.
Yes.
But on the flip side, if you're struggling with math, you can go as slow as you need to. And you
Right.
don't have to just keep barreling forward. If you don't understand the concept, you can slow down and make sure your student is going at that rate and getting a concept before moving forward.
So you talked about some of these families who kind of find themselves stuck in the middle. They make a little too much to qualify for some of these programs, but they don't make quite enough to just foot the bill for themselves. I know there are programs and ideas and concepts that will be moving through the legislative process. One of the concepts that was introduced this last legislative session was a MAPS program. Is that coming back, and what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so I think it's going to come back. It probably will come back very similar. There might be a few things that are changed in it. But MAPS was a really great program that really thread the needle and ticked a lot of boxes. Some legislators might complain that it was a long bill, but it needed to be a long bill because it was a very thorough program that created a lot of freedom and really spelled it out so that it wouldn't be left to like rulemaking authority at maybe OPI or, a Board of Public Education. It was spelled out very, very carefully by, proponents of the school choice movement to make sure that it was going to be maximally free, with a lot of freedom and autonomy built in there, with a lot of protections to make sure that parents had the flexibility that they needed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, there's a robust homeschool community in Montana and fiercely independent. And I respect that tremendously. I think it's important that homeschoolers are free from regulations that would say you can only have this type of curriculum, or you have to teach your children X policy. That I think that's kind of nonsense, because the whole spirit of homeschooling is that you have decided that this is the type of education you want to give for your children. But within that, what assurances are there for homeschoolers if they're working with the Frontier Institute, they're working with you and EdNavigate, that you guys are working for a school choice system that isn't going to burden them with excessive government interference?
Well, absolutely. So let me just say,
kind of a loaded question.
It is a totally loaded question, but I really appreciate it because it's really important that we get this message out. So I am a longtime homeschooling mom.
Yes.
I homeschooled for 10 years, but I was a reluctant homeschooling mom. I didn't really want to homeschool, but that was my only option. There wasn't a charter school available to send my kids to, and we couldn't afford private school either. Yeah. And so I've always been a both and sort of person.
Yes.
To provide multiple avenues. And we here in Montana have amazing homeschool laws that Steve White with the Montana Coalition of Home Educators really spearheaded back in the 80s and 90s. And my husband is even one of the original first generation homeschool families from the 80s and 90s. So they were homeschooled. And when I actually originally met Steve White, I was shocked because I thought he was just my county commissioner.
Sure.
And I was like, well, yeah, I just know Steve White. He's been around in politics. But when I realized what he had done for homeschooling, that he legalized homeschooling so that I had the freedom to choose a Christian curriculum so that I can guide my kids' education and build the character that I so bad wanted to, that I knew was being undermined in the public schools. I mean, I can even get teary-eyed even in this moment thinking about it. And so I thoroughly understand where homeschoolers are coming from. And yes, those freedoms need to be preserved.
Right.
And so at Frontier Institute, we would never support a homeschool bill that would infringe on their rights, that would bring more regulations, that would hurt them in any way, shape, or form. And that's why we actually supported HB 778 from Rand and Gregg, which decoupled homeschoolers from non-public school students. And so what that does is create a firewall for homeschoolers. So if any school choice policy was to come in, it wouldn't affect the homeschoolers. They would remain protected in their own set of law.
Sure.
But when we bring a school choice bill, I want to make sure that there's a door for homeschoolers to walk through if they wanted to go from the homeschooling section of code into a school choice section of code.
Sure.
And that's something that's unfortunately disappointing with the special needs ESA, is that you had to have been enrolled in public school the year before. So homeschoolers do not have access to that ESA, which is very sad because there's a lot of parents who have already exited the system. They said, my child is not learning how to read. Something is happening. I can't get this IEP to work. They won't even assess. So there's a lot of people who already got frustrated and said, I'm doing it on my own. And they figured it out. And there's curricula out there that is tailored for children with dyslexia and dysgraphia and things like that.
Sure.
So back to the homeschool and school choice stuff. I believe that we are natural allies. We're here for freedom. Yeah. And especially Frontier Institute, we exist to promote small government sort of things. And we believe that, government can bring burdensome regulations. And so that's the last thing we want to do when it comes to homeschooling or bringing a school choice bill. That's the last thing we want to do. We want maximum freedom and we want maximum autonomy for the parents because we believe that the parents know best.
Yes.
They see their child right in front of them. They know what's going to work. And we want to give them the flexibility to switch when what is happening is not working any longer.
Yes. Well, I think that firewall that you mentioned is really important because I think even within the MAPS bill, and just so our viewers understand, the MAPS bill did not pass, but it's a concept that's still out there. And I think it's something that will be, oftentimes in the legislature, you'll have an idea and maybe it doesn't make it the first year or even the second year, but it comes back and it's reformed and polished. And that's part of the process. So I can absolutely see that happening with the MAPS bill for this next session. And if it fails again, the session after that. Sometimes these ideas keep coming back and they get better and better as they do. But that firewall was built into the MAPS bill. In other words, you don't have to even opt into the program in the first place. So if there is some sort of scary regulation or government oversight over, acceptance of funds or a tax credit related to your education, and you are worried about that, you don't have to opt into the program in the first place.
Absolutely. You can look at the program and weigh the pros and cons and whether it's something that you want to agree to or not.
Yeah.
I just was speaking to a mom who's going to be moving to Montana next summer, who is currently living in Arizona, and her children are on the Empowerment Scholarship. And so they get like $7,000 per student to direct their schooling. And all the other ESAs, it's very flexible and customizable, so you can do your unbundled services. But she told me on the phone, she's like, there's no way that I would have been able to homeschool my kids had I not had access to this. Now, they can do sports, they can do music classes, they can do extracurriculars, but then also, use the funding for really good curriculum.
Yeah.
And she was looking into coming up here, and I said, well, what would you say to Montanans who we don't know what school choice is? We haven't had school choice. We have our options of public school, private school if you can afford it, and homeschooling if you can afford it.
Yes.
And she said that never once has she ever had her curriculum denied. She can always use faith-based curriculum, and so that says to me, like, they wrote a good, strong bill. And we did take some of those things from Arizona and we inserted it into the MAPS bill where it says that you will not be forced to change your creed or your curriculum. You can buy whatever curriculum that you want, if that's faith-based or secular. And for private schools, you don't have to change your hiring practices. You can continue keeping all of those things intact. And so for, a Christian private school, their autonomy would be maintained. And it was strong and just, ironclad, the way that bill was written. So with really good protections. And as you mentioned, the MAPS bill had the firewall built in. Right. So it was a separate section of code again. So if you were going to participate in that program, you are now a MAPS student. You're no longer a homeschool student or a non-public student. You are a MAPS student. And so you would be following that set of laws, which was very, very similar. I mean, it was kind of a carbon copy of what is required by non-public schools and homeschool. So
one of the things that always troubles me when I'm talking about school choice, just as a concept and as a policy, I mean, it's like win, 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 win. We're empowering parents to put their kids in the best educational environment for them. And parents know their children better than anybody. We're giving kids the opportunity to really be successful. We're empowering entrepreneurial teachers who want to go out and have this different concept, this micro school, or they want to teach at a private school, or a parent who wants to homeschool. These options are all positive, and I don't understand the opposition. So why are people opposed to this other than money?
Well, so I think in general, humans are afraid of what we don't know.
Sure.
Right? So there's the fear of the unknown. Homeschoolers are well known for being pioneer spirits. So they are like wild and free, which is beautiful and awesome.
Yes.
And I was definitely one of those parents. I'm like, I'm just going to figure this out. And it's a really interesting thing. But on the flip side, where we normally see opposition from on the school choice movement is from the teachers' unions
Right.
and the education establishment. And unfortunately, what we see often is that they're concerned about butts and seats and not necessarily the individual child.
Yes.
And I spoke with another gal, also from Arizona, who was their special education director at a public school, and she's been, working for decades in this environment of having all these school choice options and the ESA for special needs students. And it's been beautiful to see that their schools are not injured or hurt, and people are actually flourishing. The students are doing better. The parents are happier when they have more options at their fingertips.
Right.
So I think that's a really good example, a case point right there, is that the public schools are still doing well. There's a lot of flexibility. The parents are happy. And you have the opposition coming from Katie Hobbs, the governor, who just wants to kill the whole thing and just, tear it all up. But all these children are really doing well.
Right. Well, and oftentimes we look at policy issues on political lines, but really there is so much support for school choice as a concept across political divides. I mean, do you have some of the polling?
Oh, goodness. So I just got to go to Ed Choice's headquarters a couple of weeks ago and got to do a deep dive study on how to use their polling data. And I totally geeked out for
Yes.
an hour and a half on them. Because they have all these different crosstabs. And if you know anything about polling, they ask all these different questions, and then you can look at homeschooling families. How did they answer that question? Parents, people who are MAGA, how did they vote for? People who are Republicans, people who are LGBT, how did they answer these questions? And by and large, like 70 to 80% of parents, regardless of political affiliation, including LGBT families, they want school choice. 70 to 80%. Like, this is not a partisan problem. But when it comes to politics, it is a left-right issue, which is so unfortunate because parents want choice. They want options. Nobody
Yes.
wants to go and be, pigeonholed into going to only Winco because that's the closest grocery store in their neighborhood. What if I want to go to the Huckleberry Market at Rose Hours? What if I want to do that because they have all these, organic options?
Yeah.
I would be not allowed to go to that if it was public schools. Like, we
Right.
assign children into these district schools and say no. And then, unfortunately, these schools lay claim to these children, say, I get to lay claim to this child, and if there is a child in my district, I demand that they must come to my school.
Yeah.
It's not doing right by the child.
They look at the kid as a dollar sign more than an individual child.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's a lot of teachers. When my kids were in public school for 4 years, and the teachers were very, very sweet, but unfortunately their hands are tied.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that school choice, like the concept, the institution of public school is not nimble. It's
a behemoth.
It is a behemoth, and it's very, very hard to change, to do things. And part of it is the policy from the legislature. They get very specific policy, told they must do things X, Y, Z, and it
Yes.
makes it hard for them to be flexible and to run their own departments. And so we don't really have local control when
Right.
we say that that's a value. And so there's a lot of wonderful teachers. I mean, I know a couple who decided to opt out of the public school system, and they started their own micro schools so that they could be flexible and creative and meet the needs of students in a better way.
Yeah. No, and not not trying to disparage teachers whatsoever. I
Yeah.
think teachers are wonderful. I do think that we're talking about an institution and they're cogs in the system. And individual teachers are maybe wonderful, but the system itself is flawed. And I think having school choice options, empowering parents, putting kids in positions where they can be successful, and giving them the autonomy to choose the Huckleberry market versus Winco, and that kind of free market choice is just a win all the way around. And I love that you have some of that polling data just across the board. It doesn't matter your political ideology. You can use common sense and figure out that this is a good thing overall. So, Cheryl, what's the bottom line? Where do we go from here in the school choice movement? What are you looking forward to in year 2 of EdNavigate?
Yeah, so the bottom line is that parents know best. And if we can free them up to make individualized choices for their own students, everyone's going to be happier. Parents will be happier. The children are going to be thriving. And then, our test scores will usually increase as well. So, we want to see more options available for them. So we're going to continue pushing for good policy, always being mindful of autonomy, freedom, and the rugged spirit of innovation and creativity that's here in Montana, and trusting what they're doing. And then as far as the future of EdNavigate, we're going to continue offering great resources. We're going to do a big update to all of our different guides based on some of the legislation that passed. We have a few new things that are coming on board, and we're just going to be a great place for people to get all of those answers met. How do I find a school? How do I even start homeschooling? I'm there to assist parents in every way possible. Even if it's like, how do I, find someone to help me with my IEP? We can do that.
Well, thanks so much, Cheryl. Thanks for coming on today and talking all things school choice with me.
Oh, I so appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for having me.
On behalf of the Montana Family Foundation, thanks for joining us on the Family Matters podcast. If you like this content, want to see more of it, be sure to subscribe, like the video. God bless.